It's the illegal pot operation that just won't quit. You're looking live at Cafe on Harvard, just one of 4 locations believed to be raking in tens of thousands of dollars a day, despite repeated attempts to shut them down. And tonight we've got exclusive details about 2 of the men who helped start that business. One, a notorious counterfeiter. The other, a Lamborghini driving ex-wrestling champ. Well, through a dozen post-legalization crackdowns, the cafe chain has been resilient, surviving a game of whack-a-mole playing out in front of the entire city. From locks to giant cement blocks, every attempt by law enforcement countered. A legal loophole kept doors open to suspected dispensaries that were also being used as homes. It all has people frustrated.
Why aren't you closing these pot shops down? There's more to the story. Tell us the story. They're illegal.
It's destroying our neighborhood. So what's the deal? Why can't they shut it down and keep it shut down?
After years in business, others just don't see the harm.
When you see a store like that, it's not like, it doesn't scream I'm a bad person. I'm not going in there to do anything bad. You're gonna go get a cup of coffee and you're gonna go maybe smoke a joint or eat a little gummy bear or whatever it is and relax.
Well, Talia Ricci has been looking into Cafe and joins us live now. So Talia, what have you found about the people who backed the company?
Well, we've learned that 2 of the men who helped get Cafe, Cannabis and Fine Edibles started are a couple of lifelong buds from the Windsor area. We don't know their exact roles in the company or whether they still have one, but John Galvano and Wesley Weber have criminal records.
It's a black market brand that's become a recognized name in the city of Toronto. It boasts a loyal following, a wellness mantra, and a slick social media presence.
Hey guys, Cafe is here in beautiful Jamaica.
And it's also a lucrative operation.
They're making between $30,000 to $50,000 at locations, and we know that obviously this translates into millions of dollars of revenue.
So, who helped start these dispensaries? A CBC News investigation reveals 2 of the people are longtime friends in their 40s from the Windsor, Ontario area. Both with criminal records and each with his own interesting history.
First, John Galvano, 44 years old. He announced on Facebook back in 2016 he was the co-owner of Cafe. His Instagram shows he's a Lamborghini driving, Gucci wearing ex-wrestling champ. He has 2 racehorses named after pot strains, Sativa and Indica, and throws regular parties in the $1.5 million penthouse he rents in downtown Toronto. Court records show Galvano has been convicted for charges related to marijuana. Second, we have Wesley Weber, also 44 years old. He told a court 2 years ago he had loaned Galvano money before the first cafe opened and helped secure a lease for the first cafe shop. He also said under oath he wasn't part of or profiting from the business. Weber also goes by Wesley Cam and Jeff Murray. Here he is speaking at City Hall 2 years ago on pot legalization under one of those aliases.
I represent a host of dispensaries where I help to strategize and mitigate the City of Toronto's enforcement actions around the current dispensary model.
Weber was a legendary counterfeiter of Canadian currency, sentenced to 5 years in jail for forging $100 bills in the early 2000s. There was even a documentary made about him.
But the mastermind behind the greatest counterfeiting operation in Canadian history was the last person police ever imagined.
I had this notion embedded in the back of my head since I was a kid that if you could print money, you would solve all the problems in the world.
Weber is currently facing separate charges related to securities trading.
It's unclear whether either Galvano or Weber are still involved in the business. CBC News reached out to both men multiple times and did not receive a response. A cafe spokesperson did send us a statement saying its customers have a right to reasonable, dignified access to marijuana products.
It also said, in part, it is without question that the OCS system and its subsequent rollout of cannabis retail in Ontario is flawed, and that Canadians support Cafe and how it's filled a necessary void. Bylaw officers continue to crack down on Cafe's 4 locations in the city. They say the battle isn't over.
The controlling minds behind these corporations are the ones we'll be seeking out ultimately.
The city's enforcement department has laid more than 70 charges under the Cannabis Control Act related to the cafe locations. That's against cafe staff, but also the property owners. In a statement, the Ministry of the Attorney General said, "Our government will continue to monitor progress and ensure our enforcement partners have the necessary resources to ensure that illegal storefronts become a thing of the past."
So, Talia, what are the penalties for illegal dispensaries?
Well, maximum penalties for people charged under the Provincial Cannabis Control Act include a fine of up to $250,000 and 2 years in prison. Corporations can face a fine of up to $1 million. Ultimately, it is up to a court to levy the fines. Speaking specifically about Cafe today, John Tory suggested these fines should be even higher.
The problem may well be, based on some of the numbers we're hearing, that they're taking in, more money than even $1 million fine would deter, which makes it a cost of doing business. So maybe we have to talk to the province down the road about even increasing those huge fines to be even bigger, so that people don't just treat this as something where they can just say, oh, well, that's fine, we'll just treat that like a tax.
Now you can see a lot more on this story online, cbcnews.ca/Toronto. Mike?
Talia, thanks. One of our most popular stories online today. Now, when it comes to the legal way to buy cannabis, new Stats Canada data is showing a big surge in sales. Now, here's a look at cannabis sales across the country in the 4 months after legalization in October. Pretty modest, topping out at $58 million in December. Now, take a look at the last 4 months, coinciding with the retail stores opening in Ontario. Double-digit gains in March, April, and May when Canadians bought $86 million worth of cannabis.
I love the heat. Yeah, I'm a very big heat girl.
Doesn't bother me much. It looks like it does, but it doesn't bother me much.
It's actually summer. It's nice. It's a little bit sticky outside.
Got to get out there now, otherwise they say we're all going to melt into puddles of sweat today.
When we had a really lousy spring, I said I would not complain about the heat, so I'm not going to complain whatsoever.
Oh, that love-hate relationship continues as temperatures in the city are cranked up to the max. But even with the scorching heat, many went outside anyways. Toronto was under a mix of weather today. One thing remained steady. It was hot. Environment Canada keeping the city under an extreme heat warning, along with a severe thunderstorm watch in effect until this evening. Let's go now to our Angelina King, braving the heat for us today. Angelina, I haven't stepped outside in a while. So how's it feeling right now?
Oh, it's still really hot. It's still really humid. The sun is still out. It's actually hotter now than when I was at the beach here earlier this afternoon. Still a lot of people here braving that heat with me. So today it got as hot as 30 degrees, but with the humidex feeling more like 42. Because of that, Environment Canada warning people that a severe thunderstorm could be on its way. With it, it could be bringing some pretty heavy rain, some strong winds, even some hail. So Environment Canada telling people to go inside when a storm like that hits, and is also telling people to be mindful when it gets this hot out, because we spoke with a lot of people earlier today who are actually happy to be outside and enjoying the heat.
It doesn't take much to get your sweat on in these temperatures. Still, whether it was to work out, walk the dog, or just hang out, people in Toronto headed outside amid what meteorologists say is among the hottest days of the year.
Heat in general is unusual, you can say, because our seasonal temperature should be around 27, so this is well above seasonal.
So how does Toronto stay cool amid scorching heat and heavy humidity? We hit the streets for some tips.
How do you creatively beat the heat in Toronto summers?
Tarps off and H2O, lots of water.
Honestly, lots of water is definitely the key, and weirdly enough, a hot coffee, to be honest.
What does the hot coffee do?
I don't know.
Heat regulation.
It's like heat regulation, yeah.
You get some ice cream, pour milk on you, go to a pool, water park, have fun.
That's my trick. Just go to the pool.
For relief, the City of Toronto recommends heading inside to one of the 300 designated cool spaces, including pools, malls, community centers, and libraries. There are 58 public outdoor pools and 11 beaches, but 2 of those beaches, Sunnyside and Marie Curtis, are deemed unsafe to swim due to high E. coli levels after Wednesday's rainfall. At Woodbine Beach, a red flag and a warning to stay away from the water due to possible lightning with a storm brewing. A bit of rain sent some people running for cover, but it was welcomed relief.
I think it made it better. If it was sunny, it would have been like a lot hotter.
We're already wearing our bathing suit, so it would not be too bad.
Paramedic Superintendent Paul Roberts says even if it's cloudy, don't be fooled. Humidity alone makes it more difficult to cool off because your body doesn't perspire as quickly. He says it's time to get help and go inside if you experience symptoms like these.
At first, they'll feel increasingly warm and hot. As time goes on, the body starts to counteract that by making you breathe fast, heart going fast. You may experience headaches as well as nausea, vomiting.
So another reminder, if you are spending time outside, be sure to limit it, especially if you're doing strenuous activity. Of course, drink a lot of water and keep in mind children, the elderly, pregnant women, and those with chronic illnesses are at a higher risk. One interesting thing to note as we head into the evening, while it usually cools off, experts say it's actually the time you should be most mindful because it's a lot more difficult to find public spaces that are open in the evenings with air conditioning. Mike?
Good advice. Thank you, Angelina. As we said, plenty of weather warnings to go through. Look at the color right behind Nick Cernkovich right there. Talk us through it, Nick.
Sure, Mike. So obviously we know about the heat. We've got heat warnings in effect right across southern Ontario, into southern Quebec as well. These are pretty much the same warnings that were in effect yesterday. And that talking about temperatures, daytime temperatures that'll be in the mid-30s, overnight lows in the mid-20s, and humidex values even tonight at 35. Right now we're just over 40. So there's a look at the heat warnings. Now, current humidex values here in Toronto at 41. That's one of the higher places. And this takes into effect both the temperatures, but also the amount of moisture in the atmosphere. And it's really that moisture, that mugginess, that affects our ability, our body's ability to cool down when we sweat. So that's the big story here. Now, with that, this has provided the fuel for some of these thunderstorms. So earlier today, you might have seen some thunderstorms roll through the GTA, especially down around the Oakville area. We've had plenty of them around London and down in Windsor as well. The GTA at this point, we're looking at just a few pop-up showers to the north, but I think as these sink south, we may see a few of these over the next few hours in the city of Toronto as well. Most of it, though, down in southwestern Ontario. Now, as a result, we're under a severe thunderstorm watch in the city of Toronto and warnings in the area in red there, and that should last into the evening hours tonight. Forecast-wise, overnight tonight, 23 degrees. The humidex overnight, 34. Tomorrow, a high of 34 degrees, humidex of 45, but there is relief on the way. Full details in a bit.
Looking forward to hear that. Thanks, Nick.
Bet.
And the GTA isn't the only part of the country feeling the heat today. Still ahead, we'll take you to Montreal, where the mercury is also on the rise. But first, more bad news for Ontario's auto sector came down today, this time at Ford's Oakville plant. About 200 employees there will be getting layoff notices in September. Taylor Simmons is live in Oakville tonight. So, Taylor, not a great way to end the work week there.
No, and we just got some news from Ford Canada just a short time ago. They sent us a statement. It showed what some of these changes are going to be, what's resulting in these layoffs. The statement said the plant is changing from tag relief to mass relief in final assembly, which means the line will now stop during breaks. They're also eliminating one shift in paint, bringing that area of the plant to 2 shifts, affecting approximately those 200 jobs you just mentioned. So just to give you a brief idea of what goes on here, according to the Ford website, about 4,600 people work at this plant. They build the Ford Edge, the Ford Flex, the Lincoln MKX, and MKT. And Ford told us sales of the Ford Flex and Lincoln MKT are slowing, and the Edge is no longer being sold in some European markets. So those changes in consumer demand are what's behind these cuts today. It's worth noting, though, that Ford is in the middle of a massive global restructuring plan, and they previously announced cuts to 10% of their global workforce to save money, with warnings more layoffs could be coming. So it seems this is a part of that, Mike.
The provincial government was quick to comment in February when GM in Windsor laid off part of its workforce. What is the province saying about this latest round of layoffs?
Well, they're saying they're going to fight for these jobs. We just got a statement from the Minister of Economic Development's office, Vic Fideli. A spokesperson told us, "We are disappointed to learn of Ford's decision to issue layoff notices to workers at the Oakville Assembly Complex. We want employees in Oakville to know that our government stands with them and their families," adding they've been in contact with Ford offering support to the affected workers. So it's worth noting, though, the Ford government did make a big announcement in February saying they'd invest $40 million in the auto manufacturing industry and safeguarding jobs like this and supporting innovation. So they say they're continuing to do that. But meantime, official opposition leader Andrea Horwath sent out a statement of her own slamming Premier Ford for, quote, sitting on his hands. She says the province needs to develop an auto industry plan. But in the meantime, we're not sure when these layoffs will take effect, Mike, but obviously not a good day for the workers here. Certainly not. Okay, thank you, Taylor. Taylor Simmons reporting live outside the Oakville Assembly plant for us. Well, does this next situation ring a bell? You're at home expecting a package, but it always seems to come at that one moment you can't hear the door. A Toronto man kept finding missed delivery notices at his front door, so he decided to investigate. Philip Lushanik now with what he found and how Canada Post is responding.
Greg Hopkins says his home is a no-go zone for Canada Post's parcel delivery service.
If they knock.
He's received just a few deliveries since December, but mostly missed delivery notices, even when he says he's sitting just steps from the door, making it difficult for him to miss a delivery.
So it's very unlikely that I'd miss somebody if I'm at home when that's happening.
Hopkins suspects the drivers aren't even bothering to knock and has launched a number of complaints. Then it happened again this month.
I was waiting and then got an email on my phone that said, we missed you, and a delivery notification was left. And at which point I contacted Canada Post via chat to find out. And that's when things got weird.
In a chat, he says a Canada Post customer service rep told him the delivery agent had deemed his property unsafe and had issued a delivery notice card for protection.
So that they're not attempting deliveries there and they're just leaving package cards. And I asked why it was unsafe, and they said they couldn't explain that.
He was also told parcels cannot be left at his side door because Canada Post actually considers it a back door, and delivery agents aren't permitted to go anywhere that's not visible from the street. Canada Post checked with its local operations to find out if there were any delivery issues at the address. They told us there were no safety concerns at the home, but because of security issues in the neighborhood, the delivery agent determined it would be better if the customer picked up his parcel at a post office. It's not the first time Canada Post delivery agents have been accused of not bothering to attempt delivery, as this homeowner's security camera video appears to show. No package, just a missed delivery notice. And other customers have had similar experiences.
Yeah, I was home and they said they rang my buzzer, but they didn't. I don't know.
I was home, but they don't ring my doorbell. They just kind of I think, because I don't hear something, but then they'll leave a notice saying that I wasn't home.
As for Hopkins, although there's other delivery companies, he says he's stuck.
I don't think I have a choice. If you're ordering things, it's up to the shipper how they deliver things. So there's nothing I can really do with that.
But despite those security concerns, he still gets his mail delivered. Philip Lushanik, CBC News, Toronto.
Everything you see exists together in a delicate balance.
If you have been anticipating this remake of the 1994 classic The Lion King, we have two words for you: Hakuna Matata. The wait is over. The new look version of the story is making its North American debut in theaters. Is Eli Glasner feeling the love tonight? He'll let us know coming up next.
The weather update is brought to you by Train Extreme Conditions Testing. It's hard to stop a train, really hard. Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
What a classic. After 25 years, Disney's The Lion King is returning to theaters this weekend, and this time around, it's got a wild new look. We have to come up with some new language to describe this movie. It's a remake of a cartoon, but it isn't live action, and although it looks like a nature documentary, it's not at all. Eli Glasner is here. Ella, how would you describe this, Eli?
It's a strange beast. I mean,
Yes.
it is confusing. I understand, because it does feel like something out of the series Planet Earth, and yet it's actually an amazing feat of computer animation, amazing collection of new voices. It's interesting, though, the one voice they couldn't replace. There was only one Vader. There's only one Mufasa. James Earl Jones. Here he is talking to his young son, Simba.
Everything you see exists together in a delicate balance.
Amazing that a lot of that lives on computer chips. And if you think that's giving you a little bit of the nostalgia feels, let me play you the song that you knew you were going to hear. So there you go, and I can't even tell if this is from the new version or the old version. It is sounding so similar, and so much of the film is incredibly reverential. It treats the original cartoon like the sacred texts of the story, and so there's not a lot of diversion there from the original. Now, the guy responsible for this is Jon Favreau. He's done this trick before. He did it with a cartoon I loved, The Jungle Book, where, again, except for the human being, everything else was actually computer graphics, and that's what he's doing here. Even down to the cinematography, where the cinematographer would put on glasses, basically enter the virtual world of The Lion King and tell the animators where to place the shots.
There's some incredible technology that lets them go to that African savanna in Los Angeles in a room somewhere as well. How does this one compare to the animated version?
I mean, if you want to close your eyes, I think it compares very favorably. I mean, you look at the visuals at the beginning and you think, as we've been saying, like, oh, look, it's an episode of National Geographic. You see the animals coming together. And then they start doing more like animals in a musical. They start going 2 by 2 and dancing and prancing. And you start to think, okay, you know what? The effect is kind of being a little strained now. And then the animals open their mouths and start to talk, and you think, okay, I mean, does a lion do that? Or I don't know. And you know, what's interesting is the voice talent is spectacular, and so you can't blame the actors. I'll give you an example. Scar. You can't have Lion King without a good villain. Scar, the brother of Mufasa, trying to push this guy out of the way. New voice, Chiwetel Ejiofor, amazing actor. And I'll play you a clip. He's taking Simba to the gorge. He tells him they're practicing their roars, and you'll hear that little hint of malevolence. Take a look.
With a little practice, you'll never be called a cub again.
Watch this.
You'll get it, Simba. Just takes time. I'll check on you later.
Dad will be so proud, won't he?
It's a gift he'll never forget.
Look at that. I mean, you can barely see the lion's mouth move.
It's kind of flat.
It's kind of flat. I mean, the voice is doing all the heavy lifting. Now, let's compare that. Let's go back to the '94 version. Look at what they could do. Look at what the artists could do. Look at how they shaped his face, his glowing eyes, his haunches, his inky black mane, doing everything they could, bending the laws of physics just to make that character the personification of arrogance. You can't do that when you're creating this live action style, and so you have animals that look like National Geographic until they open their mouths, and then I'm getting like hammy hamster vibes.
Yeah, it's like they call it the uncanny valley, when the animation just something's off there a little bit. Is there anyone that rises above this limitation?
You know, I think the cast do what they can, and there's a number of things that I enjoyed. I mean, you can start with John Oliver. You know him from his talk show here. He's playing the bird, Wazoo, and then he's very effective there as the assistant to the Lion King. There's, of course, you might remember her, Beyonce, of course. You think, given the promotional campaign around Beyonce, her part as Nala would have been a little larger. I quite like Donald Glover, actually, as the older version of Simba. He's very good at playing these characters that are kind of lost, kind of searching. So he certainly worked for me, but I'll tell you my favorite is actually the comic relief, and I am talking about, yes, the warthog and the meerkat. These are voiced by Seth Rogen and Billy Eichner, and I'll play you a little clip here where they're actually meeting Simba for the first time, and listen to their reaction, but also how, as comedians, they're reacting to each other. Take a look.
It's a little lion! It gets bigger! Can we keep him? Can we please keep him? Oh, okay. I promise. I'll walk him every day. If he makes a little mess, I'll clean it up.
You'll be his little mess. He's gonna eat you and then use my body as a toothpick.
But one day, when he's big and strong, he'll be on our side.
I've got it. What if he's on our side? Hear me out! Having a ferocious lion around might not be such a bad idea.
So just like the face of the bird, Zazu, I mean, it's hard to kind of read their expression, but they're funny to listen to.
A warthog has a bit more range.
Yeah, there you go. So that works, and at least they're not beholden to the original characters, so they're taking more liberties. That's what Lion King needed more of. You have a great version of this movie already at home. It's more creative, it's more colorful. It might be on VHS. This new version gets 2.5 stars out of 5.
All right. Well, before you go, Eli, we have to talk about another feline-related movie
goodness.
making things. Let's talk about the new trailer for Cats.
I mean, I know I was complaining about a little too much realism. This is, I mean, talk about the uncanny valley. This is just the disturbing valley. I mean, it's just weird.
Yeah.
I mean, something about the combination of the human-like shapes and the cat-like qualities, and then, I mean, it's...
And
why
those
didn't
fur
any...
coats, or they're their own coats?
I don't, you know, there's some answers I don't need to know. I have many questions, though, and I'll be reviewing this, if I dare, come December.
The big holiday release after that certain Star Wars movie. Okay. Thanks a lot, Eli.
You're welcome.
Some Avenue Road residents are complaining that their sidewalks are too narrow to be safe, and they're hoping the city's going to do something about it. I'm City Hall reporter Lauren Pelly, and all of that story coming up.
A heartfelt plea tonight for help identifying a killer. It is from the family of a woman shot outside a Mississauga bar earlier this month. Police say she was an innocent bystander struck by a stray bullet, but say they're having trouble locating the person who fired the gun. Linda Ward has more.
A mother, a father who has lost their beloved daughter, brothers, and a sister who no longer have a sister in Jacqueline Keji-Gore.
An emotional press conference here at Peel Regional Police headquarters early this morning. The family of Jacqueline Keji-Gore stood together to ask the public for help in finding whoever it was that killed their family member. She was gunned down outside of a bar at Torbram and Drew Roads earlier this month, with her mother and her father standing beside her cousin. Spoke about the moment the family found out she had been killed.
On the morning of July 8th, 2019, Jacqueline's family worst nightmare came true. There was a knock at the family door residence. Men and women in suits identified themselves as homicide detectives. There is continuous disbelief, confusion, shock as to how and why this could have happened to Jacqueline.
Trying to make sense of a senseless act of violence. Peel Regional Police say that Keji-Gore was at a birthday party at the bar that night. About 2:30 in the morning, she was standing outside talking with some friends in the parking lot when a masked man wearing a gray hoodie approached a group of men standing by the front door and started shooting. He was running away while shooting, and that's when Keji-Gore was struck by a stray bullet.
Jacqueline was doing nothing more that night other than enjoying a night out with friends when her life was tragically taken away. She was an innocent victim in what can only be described as a senseless act of violence and disregard for human life.
And her family describes her as being full of life. As they speak, photos of Keji-Gore play on a loop on a TV screen nearby, first showing her as a smiling young toddler, then as the star basketball player on York University's varsity basketball team, and finally as a glamorous young woman studying psychology at Western University. They say her life was taken much too soon, and now they want the public's help in identifying her killer or the dark SUV he was seen fleeing in.
As a human beings, we, Jacqueline's family, friends, and her community are looking for closure.
He says people should be able to go out in public without the risk of gun violence, but it's only the public that can help put an end to it. Linda Ward, CBC News, Mississauga.
Toronto police are hoping you can help identify a man who may have robbed an 86-year-old woman of her gold chain necklace. Now, you can see the suspect run past the camera first, then the victim in a pink jacket trying to chase after him with two other men who were with the suspect close to her. Now, this happened last week in the Yonge and Bloor area around 8 o'clock at night when the woman was going for a walk with her 88-year-old husband. Anyone who recognizes the suspect or the two other men who were with him that night, you're asked to get in touch with police. Well, friends and coworkers are remembering a beloved member of the film industry who was killed on the job yesterday. Warren Appleby, seen here with his wife and children, was a special effects coordinator. People have started a memorial for him outside of Acme FX in Etobicoke. That's where he was killed yesterday. He was doing prep work for the Netflix show Titans. The Labor Ministry is investigating. In a statement, it says a worker sustained fatal injuries when they were struck by a part of a machine. Two ministry inspectors and a ministry engineer were at the FX studio today. Friends have started a GoFundMe for his family. Even Mayor Tory spoke about the tragedy today.
Sure, we learn from this accident. When you see these spectacular effects in movies and TV shows, there is an element of danger in producing them for the benefit of the camera. And we just have to make sure that whatever changes to procedures and rules and processes are necessary that come out of looking at this very carefully, hopefully, will bring a tiny degree of comfort to Mr. Appleby's family, but more importantly, will make sure that people are safe going forward.
Appleby's company, Acme FX, also put out a statement saying Warren was a beloved business partner, leader, mentor, friend, and brother to many in our community, and a loving husband and father to his wife and children. He'll be remembered for his quick humor, strong leadership, care and compassion for his crew, and above all else, his devotion to his family. Words cannot express how dearly he'll be missed. Avenue Road, just north of Bloor Street, is perhaps best known for high-end shopping and posh hotels and restaurants, but some residents say it's also known for its dangerously narrow sidewalks, something many in the area want to fix. Our City Hall reporter Lauren Pelly picked up her measuring tape to investigate.
There's no margin of error here at all.
As Albert Cole shows us this stretch along Avenue Road, there's 6 lanes of traffic whizzing by where people walk.
There are churches here, there are schools here, both secondary and elementary schools. There are also seniors' homes in the area. There's St. Clair Multi-Faith Center. So there are a lot of people with different reasons for living here and different needs in terms of getting around.
With those residents in mind, a coalition of community groups is calling on the city to prioritize pedestrians.
This sidewalk is too narrow. By anyone's definition of what safety is, this is too narrow. But so that's one of the first things we'd like to see is the sidewalk widened.
Even at its widest points, this sidewalk is tight against the traffic, and it narrows any time there's a large building or a light post.
They're quite narrow.
It is dangerous it's quite close with the traffic.
There are cars that are going pretty fast.
So, how wide are sidewalks in Toronto supposed to be? City guidelines say local roads with low traffic and few people walking around need to be at least 1.8 meters. For most streets, including busy arterials, the minimum width is slightly bigger at just over 2 meters. We decided to get a measuring tape and figure out if Avenue Road hits that minimum 2-meter width, particularly where things narrow thanks to obstacles. Well, what were the results? At the narrowest points of the sidewalk, it was only around 1.4 meters, which is well below the guidelines for arterial roads like this.
These sidewalks are so narrow that it feels like walking on a tightrope next to a highway.
The local councillor is asking city staff to review the roadway.
Everyone wants Avenue Road to function well for all users.
But there's no assurance it'll happen. One sweeping proposal to transform Yonge Street in Willowdale called for wider sidewalks and bike lanes and less space for cars. Amid big pushback from some city officials last year, that plan was shelved for more study. Cole says this time around, the city needs a new approach.
This is all part of the sort of World War II, and every transportation problem is going to be solved with wider roads and more cars. Well, that might have worked then, although it probably didn't, but it certainly doesn't work today.
Lauren Pelly, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, no surprises here. It is officially the hottest day of 2019. Toronto is under an extreme heat warning, and we're not the only ones. Heat alerts are also out for Nova Scotia and southern Quebec. Sarah Levitt has more on how people are coping with conditions in Montreal.
As temperatures soar, these kids are staying cool. With a heat warning in effect in Montreal, the hot, wet air has many seeking relief. At the newly opened Verdun Beach on the shore of the St. Lawrence River, the water's refreshing. This weekend, temperatures are expected to reach more than 40 degrees with the humidex. According to the city, not a heat wave yet, but officials are still cautioning people find a cool area.
We know that drinking water regularly and taking time out of the heat is important. It's just medically, physiologically, it makes sense. If people aren't in hot environments for days at a time, they won't have those severe impacts.
With recent memories of minus 20 temperatures and snow piled high, some Montrealers say no one should be complaining.
We live in a country with the extremes, so we need to learn to enjoy it.
It took a lot of time for summer to get here, so just want to take advantage of this wonderful weather.
Not everyone heeds advice to avoid strenuous outdoor activities. These cyclists say riding their bikes is actually helping them get cool.
Biking, it's fresh. I mean, we're next to the water too, so it's good.
Others say this heat isn't even that bad.
We're from North Carolina, so it could be much worse. Come visit us and we'll show you really, really hot.
Still, for many in Montreal, seeking any type of cool relief is the ideal way to beat the heat. Sarah Levitt, CBC News, Montreal.
So South Carolina, Quebec, Ontario, everything is hot at this time with this heat wave that's on top of us here.
Yeah, absolutely. Basically, the eastern half of the United States, all the way up into Canada, is all under this. It's not officially a heat wave. For us in Canada, a heat wave is 32 degrees for 3 consecutive days or more. So we're actually not at an official heat wave, but try telling that to the folks that are braving the heat out there right now. 30 degrees in Toronto, so temperatures have come back up a little bit with the humidex, though, and this is one of the real big stories. The humidex making it feel like 41 right now in the city of Toronto. That looks to be the highest across the region. This has been the fuel for some thunderstorms that we've had through the day today, largely centered around Windsor and then London for the better part of the day. For the GTA, we had some earlier thunderstorms roll through, especially toward the west end, but we're watching another line that's just developing. This is the one that I'm looking at over here. I actually think this is going to sink down, and if it can maintain its energy as it moves through, as it moves a little bit further south, I think we're actually going to see some more thunderstorms in the next hour to 2 hours across the GTA. Then after about 8, 9 p.m., things should settle down for us. Now, that's for tonight. Tomorrow morning, maybe a few spotty showers, but really what we're looking at is sunshine through the day tomorrow and almost a repeat of what we had today, except this one organized in advance of a cold front that's going to slide through. So through the mid-afternoon, we'll start to see showers popping up to the north, but closer to about the supper hour, we're going to see this line intensify, and that's when I think we're expecting to see it across the Golden Horseshoe. Most of the weather tomorrow, potentially severe again through southwestern Ontario, but the Golden Horseshoe certainly not out of the clear, or not in the clear just yet. Overnight tonight, temperatures down to 23 degrees. The humidex, though, 34 for tonight. As we move through tomorrow, highs to about 34 degrees. That's the temperature. Humidex of 45, but relief comes on the way tomorrow evening as a cold front rolls through. Sunday, 27 degrees, feels like 31, so the humidity coming down, and much cooler and drier starting next Monday. Mike.
Okay, thanks, Nick.
You bet.
As we head to break, here's a look at where the markets closed today. The TSX was down by over 8 points. The Dow Jones was also down by 68. And the Canadian dollar down a bit, trading for an average of 76.51 cents US. We'll be right back.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Well, U.S. President Donald Trump marked half a century of the moon landing with some of the first men there, the former Apollo 11 astronauts.
Tomorrow will represent 50 years from the time we planted a beautiful American flag on the moon.
Hand were Buzz Aldrin, the second man to walk on the moon, and Michael Collins, who had remained in orbit around the moon piloting the command module. Also present was the family of the late Neil Armstrong. Trump also received a briefing on NASA's plans to return to the moon and eventually send astronauts to Mars. After that historic achievement back in 1969, CBC went out to ask Canadians how they felt about it. Here's that footage from our archives.
I think it's just a stunt and that's it.
Doesn't impress you at all, does it?
Not very much.
I think that if man keeps on going as he is, he's going to destroy himself later, the years to come. What's out there, well, it was put there for not for us to know about.
Maybe there's special stuff on the moon. It's a lot of days to get there.
You think you might visit the moon?
Yeah, I might, but I might not.
Do you want?
Yes.
Do you think you will?
No.
Why not?
Because I'm not a boy.
Those words, "because I'm not a boy," are a pretty crushing indictment of the gender bias of the times. But the trend, of course, these days has been towards equality, even if not always at rocket speed. Andrew Chang has more.
Valentina Tereshkova, now 7.5 hours in orbit. And
another first for the Soviet Union.
When Soviet Russia put the first woman in space in 1963, it was considered a trivial propaganda exercise.
The Soviet press says she has brown hair and is slim, that her favorite flowers are daisies and gladioli, that her favorite lipstick is a thing called Moscow Red.
20 years later, NASA's first female astronaut still felt pressure to prove she deserved to be up there.
There are a lot of people in the world, and there are some of them at NASA who are maybe reserving judgment.
Following him is payload specialist Roberta Bondar.
The first Canadian woman in space had to work towards her goal, hoping society would catch up with her.
I just wanted to be there at the right time with the right skill set, and I was more qualified academically than anyone else who was selected for the program. I just felt that I had the right stuff.
Now, roughly a third of NASA's astronaut corps is female, but while it's clear women are equally suited for space, space isn't always suited for them. During the Apollo days, spacesuits were custom tailored for all those trailblazing men. The space shuttle era was off the rack, so to speak, with standardized sizes.
And it was then determined, partially because of costs, that we should decrease the number of suits. So the extra small, and extra large suits were removed. Some of our male astronauts stated that they couldn't get into their large suits, so the extra large were brought back, which made it very challenging for female astronauts who tended to wear more of the smaller, extra small suit.
As space veteran Katie Coleman told us, that meant tapping into a sisterhood of orbital problem solvers.
I had some really great advice from some of the other women astronauts who had done spacewalks before about how to adapt the suit to basically take a suit that was kind of big and make it work for me.
What we have now is a clarion call that we can do better.
And the opportunity to do better is coming quickly. NASA committed to putting the first woman on the moon in 5 years.
Well, that report from Andrew Chang. From space now to the deep seas, divers are dropping into the waters off the coast of Newfoundland to recover unexploded relics from the Second World War. After the break, the history and the real dangers behind that search.
Our divers are briefed on what the risks with these particular pieces of munition are and how they work, how they function. And so, don't hit it in this particular place where we know that's going to set it off.
There is a 76-year-old problem lurking in the calm waters of Conception Bay on the eastern tip of Newfoundland. Unexploded relics from the Second World War. Now, to make the waters safer, divers from the Canadian Armed Forces have been working there to remove those explosives very carefully. Peter Cowan has that story.
HMCS Shawinigan is busy in these waters off Bell Island. What they're doing is they're busy looking for unexploded shells that sit on the bottom of the ocean. These are from 4 shipwrecks. They were torpedoed by the Nazis during the Second World War as they were busy loading up with iron ore at the mine here at Bell Island. This was important for the Allies because iron ore was needed in order to make steel. It's not just the shipwrecks at the bottom, though, it's the ordnances that were on board, and that's why divers are down there busy trying to find and retrieve these so they don't harm anyone. It's not an easy task, and you can do all the planning you want, but once you get down there, you realize things aren't always as you expect.
You look at the plan of the ship, you say, oh, this is where the ammunition locker was, we're just going to go right there and find it, and then you get down there and realize the ammunition locker was blown apart in 1942. The ammunition strewed all over this rotting deck, and you have to dig through old pieces of metal to do it.
The shells are loaded into nets and then lifted off the bottom of the ocean. One of the key things is to keep them wet, because if they dry out, they could go boom. They're then transported to a weapons range, where it's not a very dignified end for these pieces of World War II history. They're simply blown up. But the hope is that once these sites are cleared, they'll be safer for recreational divers who want to turn this site into a National Historic Site to help people remember just how close the Second World War got to these shores of Conception Bay. Peter Cowan, CBC News, Portugal Cove, St. Phillips, Newfoundland.
Oh, can you feel it? Not the heat, the weekend. It's almost here. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Nick Cernkovich joins us again. We've been talking about how hot and humid it's been during the day. It's hot and humid this evening and has been the last few evenings, and that's significant.
Well, that is a big problem for us because what we're dealing with here is we don't have an opportunity for our bodies to recover, right?
Or our buildings to cool down and recover.
Or our buildings to cool down, exactly. And so a lot of these buildings, especially the ones that are really like heavy with concrete and brick, they trap all that heat. So in the morning, it's actually kind of cool, right? And then through the day, it traps all this heat. And then at nighttime, the temperature drops a little bit, but your house just continues to heat and heat, and there's no draft in there. So anyway, we've got one more night to go through before things start to cool down a little bit, bit of relief. But for tonight, like I said, 23 degrees, humidex of 34. That's through the overnight. And then tomorrow, of course, 34, humidex of 45. So really just kind of be careful. Check on the elderly, vulnerable populations, especially through the night.
Go out with some water and stuff. Okay, thanks a lot, Nick.
Yeah, you bet.
That's our show for tonight. Thanks for joining us. Talia Ricci has your next local news tonight at 11. Have a great weekend.